All right, so if you've been watching global trends at all, you've definitely seen the image South Korea project, right? K-pop, amazing food, super high-tech cities, this incredible convenience. It really does sound like the future.
It does. It looks fantastic from the outside, like the ultimate cool place to visit, maybe even live.
But what happens after the initial wow factor wears off? For people who actually stick around long term, we're talking 5 years, maybe more. What's the real day-to-day like once you're properly settled? That's what we're digging into today.
Exactly. We've gathered insights from various sources, interviews, reports, focusing on foreigners who've been there for a significant chunk of time. And, well, a clear pattern emerges. There's this constant push and pull.
Attention.
A real tension, yeah, between the amazing lifestyle conveniences everyone knows about and some pretty significant cultural and social challenges that build up over time. We're trying to pinpoint those make or break factors. What ultimately makes someone decide to stay or head home.
Okay, let's unpack that. Where should we start? The good stuff.
Let's start with the pull factors. The things that make Korea genuinely attractive for long-term living. Maybe even more so than for tourists.
Right. What keeps people there?
Well, the absolute number one thing, almost universally cited, safety. Just feeling secure.
Yeah, that comes up a lot.
It's huge. The low crime rates, being able to walk around late at night without constantly looking over your shoulder, people say it fundamentally improves their quality of life. Especially for women, this sense of freedom and security is mentioned again and again as something they just don't have back home.
That makes sense. And I guess that ties into the infrastructure, too, being able to move around safely and easily.
Precisely. The public transport is just world class. No exaggeration. Subways, buses, the KTX high-speed trains. It's incredibly efficient, it's dense, it covers everything, and it runs like clockwork.
And it's not prohibitively expensive either, right? I've heard the basic costs are manageable.
Generally, yes. Compared to major cities in, say, North America or Western Europe, many long-term residents find that basic living costs, utilities, food, getting around are quite reasonable. It adds to that feeling of, well, things just working efficiently.
Okay, so safety, amazing transport. What else makes it hard to leave?
The whole digital and delivery scene, this is a big one.
Oh, yeah, everything delivered instantly.
Exactly. Super high-speed internet everywhere, paying for things with your phone is standard, and the food delivery, it's almost legendary. Getting anything you want, pretty much any time, with just a few taps on an app. That level of convenience is seriously addictive. You can see why people would miss it badly if they left.
I can definitely see that. Okay, what about healthcare? That's crucial for long-term stays.
Very high-quality medical care, absolutely. And the national health insurance system makes it accessible for residents. It's generally excellent. But there's a significant but here.
Uh-oh, what is it?
Finding medical professionals who speak English or other foreign languages fluently. That can be a real challenge, especially outside of major international clinics in Seoul. So while the care is good, actually communicating your needs effectively can take a lot of effort and research. It's not always straightforward.
Right, so the system is good, but navigating it as a foreigner adds a layer of difficulty.
Got it. Anything on the sort of personal interaction side? Are people welcoming?
It varies, of course, but yeah, many sources mention positive initial interactions. We heard from one American, Kira, who said she appreciated that locals, especially maybe in smaller towns, seemed genuinely interested in her background. That kind of curiosity can feel welcoming, especially when you first arrive.
Okay, so a lot of powerful advantages. Safety, convenience, efficiency, good healthcare. It paints a pretty rosy picture of public life.
It does. The public-facing aspects of life in Korea are often outstanding.
But there's always a but, isn't there?
Yeah.
Where does the friction come in? If you're there for 5, 10 years, what starts to grind you down? This is where it gets really interesting, as you said. The stress points seem to cluster heavily around private and professional life.
Work culture. I feel like that's going to be high on the list.
Bingo. The work-life balance issue, or lack thereof, is probably the single biggest complaint among long-term foreign residents. It's not just working hard. It's often described as an excessive, deeply ingrained work culture.
Let's break that down. What does that actually mean day to day? You mentioned some Korean terms earlier.
Right, so you have yagyun, which is working late, often seen as expected, not exceptional. Then there's saying mayonghabok,
Which means?
literally something like follow orders from above. It points to a very rigid, top-down hierarchy. In practice, this means things like feeling obligated to stay until your boss leaves, even if your own work is done. It really chips away at your personal time and autonomy.
And you mentioned nunchi too. Reading the room.
Yeah, that's a constant pressure to gauge the atmosphere. understand unspoken expectations, and anticipate what superiors or colleagues want. It's this continuous emotional labor on top of your actual job duties. It can be incredibly draining. Some surveys, like one from Internations, consistently give Korea low marks for work culture and work-life balance for expats.
Wow. Okay. So the work environment is a major stressor. What about just existing basic life admin?
That can be surprisingly tough, too. Language barriers are an obvious one, but even beyond that, the bureaucracy can be intense. Kiera, the American interviewee, mentioned real frustration with simple things like opening a bank account or getting a phone plan. Procedures can be complex, require specific documents, and often lack reliable English support. Simple errands can turn into major projects.
I can imagine that gets old fast. What about personal space and privacy? That seems like another area where cultures might clash.
Definitely. For people coming from, say, the US or parts of Europe, the Korean approach to personal questions can feel quite direct, maybe even intrusive. Asking about age, marital status, relationships. It's common, but can catch foreigners off guard.
And then there's the physical space aspect.
Right. Especially in Seoul, it's just incredibly dense.
Mm.
People mention feeling a constant lack of personal space, particularly on packed subways or buses. So you've got this combination of feeling maybe socially exposed with personal questions and physically crowded in public spaces.
Okay, work pressure, admin hurdles, space issues. How about finding a place to live? Housing.
Housing. Another big one.
Yeah.
Especially in Seoul, apartments are generally small and expensive. That's common in big cities worldwide, though.
Mm.
But the real hurdle for foreigners, particularly early on, is the rental system.
You mean the deposit systems?
Yeah.
John C. and the high key money.
Exactly. The Johnsey system, where you pay a massive lump sum up front instead of monthly rent, requires huge capital that most foreigners just don't have easy access to. Even standard rentals often require very high security deposits compared to what people are used to back home. It's a significant financial barrier to getting settled comfortably.
So getting your foot in the door housing-wise can be a real struggle financially.
It really can. It makes long-term stability feel harder to achieve if you don't have substantial savings or local support.
Okay, so we're seeing a pattern. Fantastic public systems, but significant private and professional pressures. Let's go a bit deeper now into the social dynamics.
Right. Because these challenges aren't just about logistics. They impact your relationships and emotional well-being over the long haul. One subtle but persistent issue is the communication style gap.
How so?
Well, we heard from a Spanish resident who noted that communication can often feel quite indirect or roundabout. People might avoid saying no directly or express things subtly. For someone used to very direct, explicit communication, this can lead to misunderstandings or just feeling unsure of where you stand.
And Kiara mentioned things being delivered last minute, too.
Yes, that combination indirectness plus sometimes crucial information coming very late reinforces that need for nunchi, for constantly trying to anticipate things. It requires a lot of energy.
And what about finding your community? Is it easy to build lasting friendships?
That's actually a really common challenge, particularly within the expat community itself. People come and go frequently. Contracts end, people move back home, visa situations change. There's feedback, like from Reddit threads, about the emotional labor of constantly having to make new close friends because your existing circle keeps shifting. It can lead to feelings of loneliness, even if you're socially active.
That makes sense. It sounds like maintaining deep connections takes continuous effort. And we have to touch on a sensitive topic, discrimination. Does it happen?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
While many people have positive interactions, the data and anecdotes confirm that discrimination against foreigners or those from multicultural backgrounds does occur. It might be subtle, it might be overt, happening in everyday situations, banks, shops, government offices. Statistics Korea actually reported back in 2023 that nearly 20% of foreigners felt they had experienced discrimination.
Almost 1 in 5. That's significant. It adds another layer of stress to daily life.
It really does. It's a hurdle that shouldn't exist, but it's a reality some residents face.
Okay, one last area the sources highlighted. How does this experience differ if you're there alone versus with a family?
That's a crucial distinction.
Yeah.
For single residents, the big pro is flexibility. It's often easier to socialize, join groups, adapt quickly. The downside is potentially greater loneliness, that high turnover in friendships we mentioned, and having less of a built-in support system for emergencies or tough times.
Makes sense. And for families.
Families often benefit from built-in psychological stability, relying on each other. And there's the potential positive of kids growing up in a multicultural environment. But the pressures are immense. The infamous Korean education fever, Puts huge stress on parents and kids. There's the emotional strain of being far from extended family back home. And as a visible foreign or multicultural family unit, they might face more social scrutiny or discrimination than a single person might. That pressure can be intense.
So even if the parents adapt well, the family-specific pressures, especially around education, can become a major push factor.
Absolutely. It adds a whole different dimension to the decision to stay long term.
All right. So pulling this all together, this deep dive really highlights a fundamental trade-off, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The synthesis seems pretty clear.
You get this incredible quality of public life, unparalleled safety, convenience that's almost unbelievable, fantastic infrastructure, speed,
World class in many respects.
but the cost seems to be paid in your private life.
Yeah.
The demanding work culture, the pressure cooker environment, the lack of personal space sometimes, the constant need for social navigation, the emotional energy required.
Exactly. It's this balance or maybe imbalance that long-term residents are constantly weighing up. The sources basically paint a picture where the convenience and safety have to be really worth the personal and professional toll for someone to stick it out for years.
Which leaves us, and you the listener, with a final thought to chew on. Based on everything we've unpacked, if you had to choose, which side of that equation would ultimately matter more to your long-term happiness in a place like Korea? Is it the overwhelming convenience, the instant delivery, the seamless transit, the feeling of safety? Or is it the demands of the overwhelming work culture and the associated social pressures, the long hours, the hierarchy, the constant need to read the room?
That's the core question, isn't it? It seems long-term residents are answering that question for themselves every single day.